Hi everyone, it's Ren here. I hope you're well, everyone, and welcome to my room. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to some comments I got from a post I posted in the community section to my channel about, kind of asking for suggestions, wanting to hear what you guys would be interested to hear me talk about. And the first pick that I'm going to make, maybe not the most adventurous pick, but nevertheless I do think that it might be the most relevant or pertinent, the one that would make the most sense, and that it is returning to the question of philosophy, because quite pleasurably there's quite a few people that have been emphasizing that they would like to know more about this topic, and I'd say that it looks like some people even decided to follow my channel in the first place, because I kind of have this angle. Of course, I made philosophy videos in the past, which are still available, and I guess like people say sometimes that I have this kind of philosophical delivery or style, and so hopefully that contributes to making my identity, the identity of my channel, the identity of myself as a speaker. That's probably true because, when you spend so much time engaging with philosophy almost every day. For example, today I've done 4 hours of philosophy, just to give you an example. And that's pretty normal when I decide to engage in it, because I'm like, oh, that's so cool, I want to do more and more of it. Some of it is in writing, some of it is in reading. That's kind of something that's always been with me. The question of why this occupies such a large place in my life is interesting in itself. I'm not sure it's completely related to philosophy and its merits. It's like, maybe I could discuss that too. Maybe I could make the topic more interesting. It's already very interesting, but maybe I could make it even more interesting by kind of looking at philosophy and maybe providing a little bit of advice as regards where to go if your interest is to discover philosophy. But maybe I could add a little detail that has to do with, why does it take such an important part in my life, and is that connected to being INFJ, or is it connected to other things as well? So there is, many of you guys are kind of asking about, I think asking for my views on philosophy in general as a discipline, and maybe for tips as to where to go in order to become, more well versed in it. And then there's like other people who are also interested in this theme, are more specifically asking about existentialism, which is a philosophical movement. But not only a philosophical movement, it's also a literary movement, and perhaps you could argue an artistic movement. Literature is an art. And you could argue that a lot of existential literature, such as the literature of Albert Camus, for example, or the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa, these are very philosophical works, even though they're works of literature, at least on paper. So that's an interesting kind of angle to take on the philosophical question, because it happens to be maybe the philosophical field that I'm the most familiar with, and also a philosophical field that that I think INFJs would find very fulfilling. I think that if you're an INFJ, not only an INFJ, but let's say you're an INFJ and you watch this channel and you've never engaged with existentialist literature or philosophy, I think that you could derive a lot from it. So that's not really the same as wanting to have a proper background, proper footing in the history of philosophy, because existentialism is very much something that you could read now. You could start reading a book by Sartre or a book by Kierkegaard without having, a very dense technical background on the particular history of philosophy that is being referred to in existentialist books. Because existentialism in many ways is a philosophy of life. It's not supposed to be a particularly professorial or technical philosophy, even though some existential books are quite hard to read. So it really depends on what your ambitions are and what time and effort you're willing to put into becoming more familiar with philosophy, exploring philosophy. It's always good to have a broad background before you enter into a specific kind of work. The best way of being, discouraged by a philosophical work that is intimidating is to not have the background and think that the terminology is too rich, that you become alienated from the text. The text makes you feel dumb, because philosophy is in many ways the discipline that has the power to make someone feel dumb and make them want to escape. I think that's because on the surface it can be understood. It doesn't use like a mathematical list of symbols or reasoning that is symbolic in that sense. It uses words, but at the same time, a lot of the time, once you read more closely, you realize you understand the words, but you don't necessarily understand what the words mean, because the way that the reasoning is deployed is somewhat abstract. Sometimes not abstract in the sense that it is like divorced from reality, which just requires taking a massive step back on what's going on. And that's really a matter of practice, like even if you have a degree in philosophy, even if you studied philosophy for a bachelor's degree, like that does, if you were lucky, you had great professors that helped to make you improve quicker, but most of the time, any philosophy book remains hard, even when you are well versed. It's not true, if you like, and maybe that could be a soothing realization for people who are not well versed in the discipline yet. Even the most famous philosophers misunderstand some famous philosophy books. They don't understand the whole thing. There's always parts that are a little bit obscure, and sometimes through the fault of the author. So there's really no reason to be intimidated by a work of philosophy. The question is more, do you have the cast in mind? Do you have the openness of mind to want to explore it? And I think NI is a function in the INFJ that is going to draw, a lot of INFJs towards philosophy, as well as TI, because NI and TI are eminently philosophical functions, I think. NI is perhaps more exploratory and perspectivist, whereas TI is going to be more analytical and looking for clarification and precision and systematicity. In fact, even FE is an important function in philosophy, particularly for movements like existentialism or any movement that has to do with asking questions about the meaning of human freedom, human morality, what can you do, what should you do, how to organize one's life, how to relate to your individuality, the cultivation of your individuality, the relationship with others, the meaning of existence. I mean, these are themes that are explored in something like existentialism, and you can see that in a lot of books also by Dostoevsky, by Camus, and broadly associated authors, associated with philosophy or specifically existentialism, and there's a lot of questions that are FE compatible in there too. That's not true necessarily for the more technical dimensions of philosophy. So perhaps I will not talk about that necessarily. What I would say is, if you want to have a proper background in philosophy, if you're willing to make that effort, the best thing to do is to start by reading the fragments of the pre-Socratics, because that's kind of where Western philosophy, I'm talking about Western philosophy here, of course, that's where Western philosophy was born. So the fragments of the pre-Socratics by the likes of Democritus, Heraclitus, Parmenides, Pythagoras, names some of which are probably familiar to you. The best place to start is there. The fragments usually come in the form of aphorisms, and I think the collection of philosophical fragments is about um, is about 200 pages long. So it would not actually take that much time, and you could explore that. I think it would be fun to explore that kind of dimension of ancient philosophy. And once you have familiarity with that, you'll have a better idea whether you want to go further. Really, the best solution then is to become more familiar with the works of Plato and Aristotle, because they are really those Greeks at that time defined the foundations of philosophy, and in many ways, all the movements that have followed since then have been answers, challenges, improvements, discussions, explorations of the works of these two guys. One was the teacher of the other, so you can imagine like the incredible bubble of intense thought that was present in Athens at the time. I don't necessarily recommend reading the text themselves, because again that takes a lot of time. That can be quite demanding. What's good about Plato is that he's a great writer. So you could read something like the Republic. If you've never read the Republic, you could read the Republic. It's quite readable. It's comprehensive enough. It contains a lot of the themes that Plato explored in his other dialogues. The thing is that I've read most of the dialogues of Plato, but there's more than 30, and so that takes a long time. It is many thousands of pages. So if you don't have the time for that, you could read the Republic, and then you could read maybe the Symposium and some other important dialogues, and read on Plato and read on Aristotle. Same for Aristotle. You could read the Ethics in the the actual work, the Nicomachean Ethics, and perhaps you could read the Politics and the Poetics. But there's also no problem with using the resources online that can give you a summary by it's peer-reviewed author that is most likely a university professor. So stuff that you can consider to be reliable and that would be quite readable. There's two main internet resources for that. There's the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, so it's plato.stanford.edu, and there you can really search any philosopher you like and read quite developed, quite synthetic and accessible profile, description of the work of a particular philosopher that you're interested in. So you could do that with Plato, Aristotle, Spinoza, Descartes, Kant, Hegel, down to Foucault, and maybe they even have resources on Zizek. In fact, the other resource, which is perhaps better to start with, is called the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So it's the address is iep.utm.edu, iep.utm.edu, and because that to me is even less technical, whilst remaining authored by established philosophers and quite very insightful most of the time. There's really good descriptions of the works of like Hegel, Wittgenstein, and many others, and so you could go to that too. Maybe if you find that the Plato Encyclopedia resources are a little bit difficult, you could go to that other resource and really just explore the works of those philosophers and see which ones you like the most. And perhaps if you see that there's like works of some philosophers that you really like, then you could definitely consider reading the actual text. What you could also do is ask me for a specific discussion of a particular school. Perhaps in a later video I will talk about existentialism. The thing is that existentialism is a topic that I've actually discussed a few times already. I've discussed it numerous times indirectly via my videos on Schopenhauer, on Nietzsche, on Kierkegaard, but also I think that there is a video literally on existentialism, and so perhaps the best way to start is to look at those videos in the history. I will endeavor to add those links. I know I never do it because I always forget, but I'll try to remember this time. Maybe I'll add some links to more broad philosophy videos that I have also. Maybe you guys have not seen them, but I'll try to link them. But yeah, otherwise that's what I would recommend. Use those resources. Try to familiarize yourself with the classics, but like the from antiquity. you know, because they are so important to understanding all the rest, and then see what movements you vibe with and which one you like most. And if you have a request for a more specific discussion of a specific school or discipline or movements in the history of philosophy that you'd like to know more about and that I have not explored yet, feel free to ask me, because I think, in all modesty, I can talk about most of them at this point. I've done a video on Marxism, I've done a video on existentialism, and I've done quite a lot of videos on like Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, who are indirectly related to existentialism. So, you know, there's that too, in case you're interested. But that's all for now. So hopefully that video was useful, and soon I will be taking another question about whatever, you know, questions that you suggested, topics you suggested for me to cover in the future. Since you are interested in these topics. Thank you very much, and see you soon, guys. Ciao.